In the annals of history, some names are synonymous with power, others with greatness, and a select few with pure, unadulterated evil. It is the year 54 AD. The Roman Empire, the greatest civilization the world has ever known, is handed to a boy. At first, he was a beacon of hope, young, artistic, promising a new golden age. But power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is the story of how a teenage emperor became a monster, how he allegedly burned the world's greatest city to the ground, and how his thirst for glory ultimately consumed him. This is the story of Nero. When 16-year-old Nero Claudius Caesar ascended to the throne, Rome breathed a sigh of relief. His predecessor, the paranoid and reclusive Claudius, was dead. Many whispered, poisoned by Nero's own ambitious mother, Agrippina the Younger. Nero was everything Claudius was not: youthful, charming, and educated by the finest minds, including the philosopher Seneca. Agrippina saw her son not just as an emperor, but as her puppet. She expected to rule through him, even appearing on coins with him, a privilege never before granted to an emperor's mother. But Nero began to chafe under her control. The breaking point was love, or obsession. He became infatuated with a sophisticated and ambitious woman named Poppaea Sabina. There was one problem: his wife, the virtuous Claudia Octavia. Agrippina defended Octavia, seeing her as a pillar of her own influence. Poppaea, it said, issued Nero an ultimatum. He would never truly be free or truly be hers while his mother lived. The cracks in Nero's soul widened. The artist prince was about to become a matricide. First, he tried a subtle accident. A collapsible boat meant to drown her. When she miraculously survived, swimming to safety, all pretense was gone. Nero sent armed assassins to finish the job. The story goes that as they raised their daggers, Agrippina ripped open her tunic and screamed, "Strike here, for this womb bore a monster!" With his mother dead, the last restraints were off. He divorced Octavia, exiled her, and then had her executed. Poppaea became his empress. Anyone who dared whisper criticism, senators, stoic philosophers, old rivals, was accused of treason, their properties seized, their lives extinguished. The Senate, once promised power, now sat in terrified silence. The people's adoration began to curdle into fear. And then, in July of 64 AD, the unthinkable happened. A fire broke out in the shops around the Circus Maximus. Fanned by strong winds, it exploded into an inferno, racing through the narrow, winding streets of Rome's ancient districts. For 6 days and 7 nights, the city burned. Ash choked the air, flames turned night into day, and the screams of the trapped were drowned out by the roar of the fire. Where was the emperor? The most damning legend places him not organizing relief efforts, but on a balcony at his villa, where he allegedly donned an actor's costume, picked up his lyre, and sang a poem about the sack of Troy, seemingly mesmerized by the apocalyptic beauty of the destruction. Whether this actually happened is debated, but the perception was everything. To the homeless, grieving masses, it was not just neglect, it was a monstrous performance. And then came the final, crushing betrayal. As the embers smoldered, Nero didn't just see tragedy, he saw an opportunity. 2/3 of Rome was destroyed. Now he could build his dream, a vast, sprawling personal palace complex called the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It wasn't a home, it was a statement. A palace of such opulence it would sprawl across the heart of Rome, complete with vineyards, parks, and a colossal bronze statue of himself, the Colossus Neronis. To the people whose homes were now his lawn, the message was clear. "Your tragedy is my monument." The people needed someone to blame, and the whispers were growing into shouts. Nero did it. He burned the city to clear land for his vanity project. The mood in Rome turned from grief to outright rebellion. Needing a scapegoat, Nero found one in a small, obscure religious sect. He pinned the blame on the Christians. They were mysterious, they kept to themselves, and they were deeply unpopular. What followed was an orgy of state-sanctioned cruelty so vicious it shocked even jaded Rome. Christians were crucified, set on fire to illuminate imperial gardens, and torn apart by wild animals in the circus. It was a spectacle of suffering designed to distract, but it only cemented Nero's legacy as a sadist. The Senate had finally had enough. Plots were hatched. Though the most famous one failed, the message was sent. Nero was no longer fit to rule. The empire itself began to revolt. Military commanders in the provinces, like Galba in Spain, declared themselves emperor and marched on Rome. The Senate, emboldened and seeing which way the wind was blowing, took the ultimate step. They declared Nero an hostis publicus, an enemy of the state. The boy they had adored was now condemned to a brutal public execution. Abandoned by his guards, his friends, and his allies, Nero fled. He hid in the villa of a freedman, just outside Rome. He could hear the hooves of the cavalry sent to arrest him. He knew the fate that awaited him, to be stripped naked, dragged through the streets, and beaten to death with rods, or tied to a stake and violated. He was utterly, completely alone. A coward to the end, he couldn't bring himself to take his own life. With the help of his last remaining servant, he finally drove a dagger into his throat. His final, pathetic words were, "What an artist the world loses in me." His death was met with jubilation. The Senate ordered his memory damned, his statues torn down, his name erased from monuments. The colossal statue he built of himself was renamed to the Sun God, and its base would later become the foundation for the Flavian Amphitheater, the Colosseum. The very symbol of Rome was built, ironically, over the ruins of his vanity. So, was Nero the most evil emperor? He was certainly a contender. He murdered his family, persecuted his people, and possibly burned the eternal city for his own glory. He was a paradox, an artist and a brute, a populist and a tyrant. He showed us that the most dangerous monster is not the one who rules through fear from the beginning, but the one who promises heaven and then unleashes hell.